Today we are diving into Figma, one of the most powerful and user-friendly design tools for creating website, mobile apps, and prototypes. In this video, we'll spend the next hours going step by step through the basics, using a simple project to guide us. By the end, you'll be ready to confidently start designing your own projects in Figma. Before we dive into Figma, let's take a quick look at the agenda. Here is what we are going to cover step by step to help you become comfortable with Figma's essential features. Each of these topics will be covered in detail and you'll learn to use them in your project. If you are looking for a specific feature, feel free to jump to that section in the video. To access Figma, simply search for Figma on Google and click on figma.com. You'll be greeted by its amazing website. Now, if it's your first time using Figma, click on Get Started for free. And if you already have an account, just log in. Next, you can either continue with Google or enter your email manually. I'll be using Google here. You'll then be prompted to enter your name. This is the name that will appear on your Figma files. I'll just use my first name, Masa. Alright, hit continue. Now you'll be asked what kind of work do you do? I'll choose design. Then it asks, do any of these describe your work? I'm selecting freelancer, but feel free to choose whatever best fits you. Next, it's who do you usually collaborate with? I'll pick teammates here. Then, there is an option to invite collaborators, but I'll skip that for now. The next question is, what brings you to Figma today? I'll select using it for fun. After that, it asks, have you used Figma products before? I'll say no, it's my first time. Finally, you'll choose which plan to use. You'll have three options: starter, professional, and organization. In this video, we'll go with the starter plan, which is completely free and includes all the essential features you'll need. If you want things like unlimited projects, version history, or additional functionality, the professional plans might be worth considering. The organization plan is tailored for businesses and has advanced features for team collaboration. For now, I select starter and hit continue. Now Figma asks, what would you like to do first? You have three options: design with Figma, work with FigJam, which is an online whiteboarding tool for collaboration like brainstorming sessions, or present with Figma Slides, a presentation tool recently added to Figma. We'll skip this for now because I want to show you the main files browser first. Alright, here we are in Figma's main file browser. This is the screen you'll see every time you sign in. It's your hub for creating new files and projects, as well as accessing files that are important to you. On the left-hand side, you'll see we are currently in the Recents view. Since we haven't created any files yet, this section displays pre-populated examples to help you get started. At the top, you'll find shortcuts to create a new design file, a FigJam board, a slide deck, or to import designs from apps like Sketch or external Figma files. On the right-hand side, there are menus to filter your view, which can be especially helpful as you start working with multiple files. Now let's focus on the left-hand side again and click into Drafts. This section is private to you, like your personal workspace. It's a great place to sketch out ideas that aren't ready to share yet. To create something new in Drafts, simply hover over the section and you'll see a plus icon on the right. Clicking this lets you create a new design file, a FigJam board, or import files from your computer. You'll notice that when you hover over a file in any view, a star icon appears in the top right corner. Clicking the star adds the file to your favorite for easy access, and clicking it again removes it. Here at the bottom left, we can see the Explore Community section. Figma has its own community packed with tons of useful resources like Figma Slide for presentations, design resources, plugins, FigJam assets, and more. Let's click on Browse All Design Resources. Here you can see tons of designs. Everything is built in, so you don't need to search for Figma templates or assets elsewhere. You can simply search right here. For example, let's search for the food recipe app and select the first result. To use it, click Open in Figma. Now Figma create a copy of the original design, so don't worry, you can change or even break it without affecting the original. To explore the design, open the File section where you'll find various pages dedicated to the food recipe app. You can move elements, study them, or use them as inspiration. It is a fantastic way to learn. Now let's creating something from scratch. Go back to the file browser by clicking on the main menu and selecting Back to Files. You'll see the food recipe app saved in the draft section. If you want to start a new design for personal use, you can click Create Now and select Design File. Or, as I showed earlier, hover over Draft and click the plus button. But what if we want to work with a team? Let's open Mahsa Ibrahim's themes here. We can add a project to this default theme or create a new theme. To create a team, give it a name and optionally add members. We'll skip this step for now. Keep in mind that with a free account, each team can only have one project. If you need more, you'll need to upgrade your plan. For this tutorial, we'll stick with the starter plan, which is free. Once you add a project to your team, it will appear under the team's name. For example, here the team is called Practice Together, and there is a team project in it that currently has no files. To add a new file, click Create New and select Design File. This will immediately open the editor with a blank canvas, ready for you to start designing. Here is the Figma interface, and this is the new UI 3 version. If you like to go back to the old design, which is UI 2, you can open the Help and Resources menu from down here and click Go back to previous UI. But in this video, I'm going to talk about the new UI 3 version. Okay, let us start it. Basically, we can divide this interface into 4 main sections. The canvas is in the middle, the navigation panel is on the left, the properties panel is on the right side, and the toolbar is at the bottom. The canvas is where you put all your frames, artworks, and designs. Basically, this is where you design. If you need a bit more room on the canvas, you can minimize the UI from the navigation panel. Click the Minimize UI button to collapse both the navigation panel and the properties panel. Next to the Minimize UI button, you can see the notification icon. If you receive any comments in the future from your teammates, you'll get notifications here. On the left side, you'll see the main menu. Below it, you can see the project name, which is Untitled by default. Let's rename it to Practice. Under the project name, it mentions that this is a team project and that you are using Figma's free version. You can click the drop-down icon next to the project name to take actions on the file, like moving it, publishing a library, and more. In the File section, you can have up to 3 pages in free version of Figma. Pages are used for organizing your designs. Below the File section, there is the Layers panel, which we'll explain later. Next to the File tab, there is the Assets tab, which we'll talk about after explaining components. In the Properties panel, you can see who is currently working on this file. Right now, it's only me. We'll explain how to use the present and share button in other part of this video. When there is nothing selected on the canvas, or when you click on empty space, you'll see the page section in the Properties panel. This represents your canvas. By default, it has a set color, but you can change it here. Adjust the opacity, or even hide it. Below that, there are other sections, some of which are more advanced. We'll discuss those in separate videos. Keep in mind that the Properties panel will display different properties depending on the object you have selected. And here we have the toolbar. This is where you'll find many useful tools for designing. The first option is the Move tool, which has 3 settings: Move, Hand, and Scale. By default, it's set to Move. I'll explain each of these in a bit, but first we need some objects on our canvas to work with. Next, we have the Region tool, which includes the Frame tool by default. Frames are super important because they are basically like blank pages where you can start your design. If you have used other design tools, you might know them as artboards. They work the same way. You can put stuff on them and start creating. To create a frame, you can press F or A on your keyboard. Both shortcuts do the same thing. Then, just click and drag to make a custom-sized frame. You'll also notice that after pressing A, a list of pre-built frames appear on the right side. These have predefined sizes for devices like phones, tablets, and desktops. For example, under phones, you'll see options like Android Compact, Android Medium, and iPhone 16, and you can even see their dimensions. There are similar options for tablets, desktops, presentations, and more. If you are designing for different screen sizes, you can easily choose the frame you need. For example, you might pick a desktop frame, a tablet frame like an iPad mini, and a mobile frame such as the iPhone 16. Just click the one you want and it'll pop up on your canvas, ready for you to start designing. Now that we've got some frames, let's talk about the Move tool. By default, it's set to Move, and you can quickly select it by pressing V on your keyboard. This tool lets you select and move objects around your canvas. If you want to move multiple objects, you can click and drag to select them all. Another way is to hold Shift and click each object one by one to add it to your selection. The second setting under the Move tool is the Hand tool, which lets you move around your canvas. But honestly, you probably won't need to select it, because there is a faster way. Just hold the spacebar on your keyboard, then click and drag to move around. For zooming in and out, it's also super simple. Just hold the Command key on Mac or Control on Windows and scroll with your mouse wheel. The third option is a Scale, which is useful whenever you want to scale something proportionately. The next option in the Region tool is Section. The Sections tool helps you organize and manage your content better within a file. It's perfect for grouping and labeling specific areas of your canvas, especially useful for navigating large or complex designs. Then we have the Slice tool. This is great for exporting a portion of your canvas. For example, if you want to share part of your design workflow or capture a high-quality screenshot, the Slice tool is your go-to. To use it, just click and drag around the area you want to export. You can adjust the size and position as needed. Remember, only what's inside the slice boundary will be exported. Once your slice is set up, you can apply export settings to it, just like you would for any other object. Now let's talk about the shape tools. These lets you create basic shapes like rectangles, lines, arrows, ellipses, polygons, and stars. There's also an option to place an image directly onto your canvas. For example, if you want to quickly create a button, you might use a rectangle. But here's a tip. Instead of using a rectangle, it's often better to use a frame to make a button. Don't worry, we'll discuss why later. For now, let's stick with the rectangle. Select it, go to your frame or artboard, and just click and drag to draw a rectangle. Once you create a shape, you'll see its properties in the Properties panel on the right. At the top, you'll find the alignment setting. You can align your object within the frame to the left, right, center, or middle, both horizontally and vertically. Below that, you'll find the position settings for the X and Y coordinates, which you can adjust to move the shape. Another way to measure distances between objects is to select the first object, hold down the Alt key on Windows or Option key on Mac, and hover over the second object. If you hover over the frame, it will show you the distance between the object and the frame. If you hover over a second rectangle, it will show the distance between the two objects. Below the Position section, you'll find the Transform section, where you can rotate or flip your object. In the Layout section, you can adjust the width and height of the shape. The Appearance section lets you change its opacity or corner radius. You can also change the fill color or add stroke and customize its setting. You can explore all the shape options like ellipses, which have their own properties. While all shapes share basic settings like width, height, and corner radius, some have additional properties unique to them. If you want to adjust a shape more precisely, you'll need to enter Edit mode. There are two ways to do this. Select the object and click Edit Object in the Properties panel, or simply double-click on the shape. When you are in Edit mode, an extra toolbar appears. Here you can move individual nodes to create custom shapes. Once you're done, double-click anywhere outside the shape to exit or use the Close button. Let's remove these shapes for now and move on. Next, we have the Creation tools, which includes the pen and pencil. These tools are perfect for creating custom shapes and drawing unique curves. They give you full control over nodes and lines, so you can craft original designs. After that, we have the Text tool. Just select it, click anywhere on your canvas, and start typing. Let's say I type, "Figma is awesome." Once your text is on the canvas, you can adjust it in the Properties panel. For example, I'll increase the font size to 40 and make a text bold. There are plenty of other properties you can use to customize your text. Okay, we'll cover comments, actions, and dev mode later. On the navigation panel, if you click on the file, here you can find the Layers panel. Whenever you create something, whether it's a frame, text, an image, or a shape, it will appear as a separate layer in the Layers list. If you are familiar with other design tools like Adobe Photoshop, Adobe XD, or Sketch, the concept of layers will feel familiar. Layers stack on top of each other, like a deck of cards. Let me show you what I mean with this example. Here we have a design with several frames. If you check the Layers panel, you'll see each frame listed. This icon here indicates it's a frame. By clicking the arrow next to it, you can expand the frame to reveal all the layers inside. For instance, I can select this text layer. Notice that every layer has a unique icon. Text layers have a T icon, and image layers have this icon. You can rename any layer by double-clicking its name and typing in a new one. One important thing to keep in mind is that layer order matters in your design. For example, if you want text to appear on top of an image, the text layer must be above the image layer in the layers list. If the text layer is below the image, the text won't be visible. You can easily rearrange layers by dragging and dropping them. This gives you complete control over how your design elements are stacked. Alright, let's dive in and create a real example together. This time, we'll recreate the Medium website homepage. Start by visiting medium.com and looking at its homepage. It's simple and clean, so it's a great starting point. Take a screenshot of the page and drag and drop it into Figma. This screenshot will serve as our reference for the design. The first thing we'll do is match the background color of the desktop frame to the website. Select the frame, go to the Fill section, and click on the default white color. Use the color picker to grab the background color directly from the reference image. An even quicker way is to select the frame, press I on your keyboard to activate the color picker, and click on the background in the reference. Now let's add some text. Grab the text tool by pressing T on your keyboard. Type the content. Then adjust its size and font to match the reference image as closely as possible. You'll notice that the text in the reference is left aligned. To align our text, select the text layers and click the Align Left button. Next, we'll add an image. Go back to the Medium website, copy the image you need, and paste it into Figma. To resize this proportionally, hold down Shift while dragging one of the corners. This ensures that the image maintains its original proportion while being adjusted. Let's move on to the button. The first things that might come to mind is to just draw a rectangle, type some text, and place it on top. While this seems easy, it's not a good practice. Why? Well, even if you group them together by hitting Command and Control G, problems start popping up. For example, if you try to stretch the button or resize it, things don't adjust properly. And if you change the button label, the button doesn't resize to fit the text. It's not responsive at all. But don't worry, Figma has a much better solution: the auto layout. Here is how it works. First, grab the text tool or just hit T on your keyboard, type something like button, and let's give the text a white field so it stands out. Next, right-click on the text and select Add Auto Layout, or use the shortcut Shift and A. Now, if you look at the Layers panel, you'll see the Auto Layout icon. It also says Frame, because when you add Auto Layout, it wraps the content inside the frame. To make things more visible, let's add a black fill to this Auto Layout frame. With Auto Layout, you get some amazing features. On the right-hand side, you'll see alignment options that let you position elements inside the frame. Left, right, center, you name it. Right now, we only have one element, so alignment doesn't seem like a big deal. But it's super useful when you are working with multiple elements. You'll also notice padding controls. This lets you add horizontal or vertical spacing around the text. For example, if we set the horizontal padding to 16, you'll see the button width increase. Let's do the same for the top and bottom padding to make the height look balanced. Now here's the magic. If you change the text something longer, like Start Reading, the button automatically resizes to fit the new label. That's what we want, a responsive button that adapts to the content. Next, let's round the corners by adjusting the border radius. This makes the button look polished. If you want to tweak it further, you can increase the font size or adjust the padding. Finally, don't forget to rename your button to keep things organized. And there you have it, a clean, responsive button built the right way using Auto Layout. Auto Layout isn't just for buttons. It's great for grouping related elements. To keep things clean, let's auto layout the text and button together. Select the text, hold down Shift, and click on the button. Then press Shift A to create a vertical auto layout. This makes it easy to adjust the spacing between elements or rearrange them without breaking the layout. Now let's create the header. Search for the Medium logo on Google and find the transparent PNG version. Use the Tools section in Google to filter by color and select Transparent. This one seems good. Let's check if it's the one used in the Medium site. No, it's a bit different, so let's go with this one instead. Copy the logo, paste it into Figma, and crop it to keep only the parts you need. To crop, Select the image, go to Properties panel, and click on Crop Image. Then adjust the size to fit the header. For the menu items, use the Text tool again. Hit T on the keyboard, type each item, and adjust the font size and style as needed. For the Get Started button, duplicate the button we created earlier and change its label. Let's reduce the padding to make it smaller. Select all the menu items and the button, press Shift-A to add them to an auto layout. And adjust the spacing to make everything look neat and aligned. Now we need to put the logo and the menu in a frame. Select Frame tool from the toolbar or hit F on your keyboard and draw a frame that contains both the logo and the menu. And rename it to Header. Align the logo and header menu to the center within the frame. And let's add a bottom stroke. To do this, select the frame, click on the Stroke Plus button, and you'll see a stroke applied to all sides by default. But we only want the bottom side to have the stroke. Click on the strokes per side and enable only the bottom stroke. And here is the header. Let's adjust the size a bit. And that's it. You've just recreated a simple version of the Medium website homepage while learning about Figma's features. Alright, let's suppose you want to add an icon to this Start Reading button. It's an easy task. For this example, let's use a right arrow icon. We can either create icons ourselves or use plugins to make it simpler. A plugin is a third-party app, or in simple terms, a piece of software that adds extra functionality to Figma, letting you do things beyond its standard features. Figma offers many useful plugins that can enhance your projects. To use plugins, you have several options. You can start by exploring the Figma community. If you navigate to the community section and scroll down, you'll find resources like plugins. Simply click on the Plugins tab and you'll see a variety of plugins available. To try on, just click on Open In button. But instead of demonstrating this here, let me show you how to use a plugin directly in your project. Let's go back to our project. Suppose we want to use a plugin now. You can access it through the Actions tool in the toolbar. Once you open the Actions tool, you'll see 3 tabs: All, Assets, Plugins, and Widgets. Since we need a plugin, let's click on Plugins and Widgets. Here you'll find a list of plugins you've previously used. To research for icons, type icon in the search bar. You'll see a list of plugins offering various icon packages. Feel free to explore them and find one that suits your project best. There are also highly recommended plugins shared by other designers that can be very useful. You might also want to check out my video on 7 amazing plugins in Figma for more recommendations. For now, let's open the Iconify plugin, one of the best tools for finding icons. Click Run to get started. You'll see a variety of materials and icon sets. Let's search for the right arrow icon in the search bar. You'll see a list of options to choose from. Let's pick one of them. Here you can adjust the icon size and color, but let's keep it as default for now. We can always change it later. Click Import as Frame to bring the icon into your project. Close the plugin, and you'll find the imported icon in your workspace. Next, we want to place the icon on the right side of the text in the button. First, let's change its color to white so it's visible against the black background of the button. Now drag and drop it into the place. See how easy that was? It's seamless because we designed the button using auto layout. Now we can adjust the gap between the objects in the button. Let's set it to 8. Perfect. Let's suppose we have multiple pages, and each page has at least 3 buttons. How can we reuse this button on other pages? One option is to recreate the button on each page, but that's not a good approach. Another option is to copy and paste it using Ctrl+C or Command+C, but this also isn't ideal. Why? Because if the company or client decides to make a change later, say updating the button's color, you would need to manually adjust it on every page, one by one. This process is time-consuming and tedious. To solve this, we use components. Components are reusable elements that allow us to make changes in one place and have them reflected everywhere the component is used. Let's see how to create a component using our button. Select the button and click Create Components. When you do this, you'll notice the button's boundary changes to purple. And in the Layers panel, its icon changed to a diamond shape. This diamond icon indicates it's a component. Now, how do we use this component? One way is to duplicate it. Press Ctrl+D or Command+D to create an instance of the component. If you check the Layers panel, you'll notice the icons for the original component and its instance are different. The original is the main component and the duplicate is an instance. Here is an important distinction. If you delete an instance, the main component remains unaffected. But if you delete the main component, all instances will lose their connection and you won't be able to reuse the component unless you restore it. To restore, right-click on the instance and select Go to Main Component. Then choose Restore Main Component. Though sometimes this option may not work, so be cautious. It's a good practice to keep the main component in your design system and only use instance in your frame. Now that we've created a component for the button, let's replace the existing buttons on our pages with instance of this component. You can duplicate the main component to create an instance or drag and drop it from the Assets panel under Local Components. Let's look at the differences between an instance and the main component. Suppose we've created a membership page. Some of these buttons are identical to the black button we have designed earlier, while others are different. To reuse the black button on the membership page, we don't need to recreate it. Drag an instance of the button from the Assets panel. Now let's say we don't need the icon on this instance. If we delete the icon from this instance, nothing changes in the other instance. But if we edit the main component, such as changing the button's font to bold, all instances will update automatically. This is crucial to understand. Edits to the main component affect all instances, but edit to an instance only affect that instance. Now let's address the transparent button with a stroke. It's not efficient to modify an instance of the black button to make it transparent, especially if this button is used across many pages. Instead, we should create a variant. Variants allow you to create different versions of a component. For example, buttons often have multiple states, such as default, hover, disabled, or different types like primary or secondary. Let's create a variant for the transparent button. Select the main component for the black button and click Add Variants. A new dashed frame and a duplicate of the button will appear. This lets you create a new variation. Update the properties on the right panel. Rename property 1 to type, then set the first button's type to primary, and set the second button's type to secondary. You'll see in the Layers panel that the component now has two variants, primary and secondary. Update the secondary button's color and add a stroke. To use this variant, drag the button from the Assets panel. Then switch its type to secondary. You can now reuse the transparent button across your design and make changes easily by editing its main component. Now let's add functionality to toggle the icon's visibility without deleting it. Select the component and click the plus button next to its properties. Choose Boolean from the list and rename it to icon. Set it to true by default. You'll see the Boolean property added, but it's not yet linked to the icon. Select the icon's frame within the button, go to Appearance and bind it to the icon property. And repeat this process for the secondary button. Now you can toggle the icon's visibility on or off whenever needed without removing it. Grids are such a powerful tool when it comes to keeping your design organized and aligned. They are like invisible guidelines that help structure your layout, making everything look neat and consistent. And in Figma, adding grids is super easy. All you have to do is select a frame, go to the Layout Grid section in the Design panel, and click the plus button. By default, you'll get a 10-pixel square grid, but you can customize it to fit your project's needs. If you click on the Layout Grid setting icon, you can see in Figma there are 3 types of grids. The first is simply called Grid, which gives you a uniform set of squares. Great for general layouts. Then you have columns, which are ideal for horizontal alignment and are especially helpful for responsive web design. Finally, there are rows, which aligns elements vertically. For desktop frame, the most common setup is a 12-column grid. This is a standard because it's flexible. You can easily divide your layout into halves, thirds, or quarters. I always set the grid type to stretch so that the columns adapt to the frame size. And then I tweak the margin and gutter. The margin is the empty space on the sides of your grid, and the gutter is the space between the columns. For desktops, I like to set the gutter to 32 pixels and the margin to 160 pixels. That's a popular choice. The margins can vary depending on your design. When it's come to tablets, I reduce the number of columns to 8 because we are working with less space. I also adjust the margin down to 32 pixels and the gutter to 16 pixels. This makes the design more compact but still visually clean. Now for the mobile design, I shrink the grid even further to 4 columns. Both the margins and the gutters here are set to 16 pixels. This is a good minimum to ensure enough breathing room around your content while still making the most of the limited screen space. I don't recommend going below 16 pixels for margins, even when things feel tight. Let's talk about vertical grids. You can add one by going back to the Layout Grid section, clicking the plus button again, and this time changing the type to rows. I like to start my rows from the top and set the height to 8 pixels with a gutter of 8 pixels. This works perfectly if you are following an 8-point grid system, which ensures all your spacing is consistent. The nice thing about these rows is that they snap your elements to the nearest line, keeping everything perfectly aligned. And the best part, these grids are responsive. As long as you've set them to stretch, they'll adjust automatically when you resize the frame. This makes designing for multiple screen sizes so much easier. Now I want to address a common question, especially for junior designers. Should everything in your design align perfectly with the layout grid? The short answer is no. Not everything needs to align with the columns. and I'll show you what I mean. In this design, you'll notice there is an image, and part of it sits outside the column grid, and that's totally fine. Before we wrap up, let me give you a quick tip to make working with grids even easier. By default, Figma's nudge amount is set to 10 pixels, but if you are using an 8-point grid system, you'll want to change this to 8 pixels. To do this, go to the main menu, hover over Preferences, select Nudge Amount, and set the big nudge from 10 to 8. Now when you move elements with the arrow keys while holding the Shift button, they'll stay perfectly aligned with your grid. And that's it! Grids in Figma are a game changer. Once you understand how to set them up for different screen sizes and use them effectively, your designs will not only look organized but also adapt beautifully to any screen. Now let's talk about constraints. If I select any element on my frame, you'll notice this button in the position section called Constraint. Let me move this frame here to make more space. If I select this frame and resize it, you can see the header, the text, and the image stick to the top left corner and move along with it. But they are not scaling or repositioning, they are just fixed to that corner. Now, if I select this image or move the header a little, you'll see these blue dashed lines. These lines represent constraints. Every element in Figma has constraints by default. Constraints tell Figma how elements should behave or be positioned when the frame is resized. Let's see an example of this on the Medium website. Watch what happens when I resize the browser window. As I shrink or stretch it, the header content stays in the center, and the underline stretch to both the left and right sides. To replicate this behavior in Figma, we need to adjust the constraints. Let us start with the header. First, we'll experiment with the constraint options to see what works. We want the underline to stretch to both the left and right sides. So, instead of sticking to just the left or right, it needs to be stick to both sides. Let's set the header's constraint to left and right and test it. Now, when I resize the frame horizontally, the underline stretches perfectly, but the header's text still sticks to the left side. To fix that, let's set the text constraints to center. Now, let's test it. Perfect. The header behaves just like it does on the website. Now, what about the image? On the medium side, the image always sticks to the right side. And when I resize the window vertically, it stays centered. Let's set the image's constraint to right and center. Perfect. Finally, let's look at the text and button section. It seems like it should stay centered both vertically and horizontally. Let's set the constraints to center for both directions. Now, let's test it. Perfect. And that's a summarized explanation of constraints in Figma. With these settings, you can create responsive designs that adapt to different frame sizes seamlessly. What's a prototype? A prototype is basically a simple or initial version of your final product. It's a concept that lets you show how screens are connected, how a user moves from one page to another, and illustrate the overall flow of your app or website. Let's create a prototype together. I want users to click on the membership in the header menu and be taken to the membership page. So I'll select the membership option in the header and then go to the Prototype tab. When I hover my cursor over the selected part, you'll notice these little plus signs in circles on each edge. I'll click on one of them, drag it, and hover over the membership frame we created earlier. Now we've connected these two screens. When we make this connection, an interaction details window pops up. Here you can adjust how the prototype works or looks during the transition. For example, we have the trigger here. By default, it's set to onClick. If you open the menu, you'll see other options like undrag, while hovering, and while pressing. In this case, we want the navigation to happen when someone clicks the membership button, so we'll leave it set to onClick. Next, we have the action, which shows what happened after user clicks. Other options include change to, back, open overlay, and more. Since we are navigating to the membership page, we'll keep it as it is. Below that is the destination, which tells us where the prototype leads. Since we connected it to the membership page, it's already set to membership. Then there is the animation section, where you can pick an animation style. By default, it's set to instant, but you can choose other options depending on what you need. Let's see how this works. To preview your prototype, you can click the play button here, where it says Flow 1, or use the play button at the top. I click the one at the top. Now if I hover over the membership button, my cursor changes to a hand, showing that it's clickable. Let's click it and see what happens. And there we go! We are taken to the membership page. As you can see, creating a prototype in Figma is super easy. This is the most basic type of prototyping. Of course, you can create advanced prototypes and animations, but we are not diving into those today because they take more time. Okay, alright, now let's suppose we want to animate this button and create a hover state for it. To do this, we'll use a component. A hover state is basically one of the button's states, or you could think of it as another version of the button. This is where components become really handy. First, let's select the button component and click on the purple plus to add a variant. Now let's change its fill to something lighter. This way, when user hover over the default primary button, it changes to this lighter version. Next, select the entire component again and head over to the Properties panel. Click the plus button here and create a new property. We'll call this property State and keep its value set to default. Then select the new variant we created and change its state to hover. Now we have a primary button with a default state and a primary button with a hover state. Let's do the same for the secondary button. Select the secondary button, click on the purple plus below it to create another variant, and make a few changes. Let's make its stroke thicker and change the font to bold. Then set its state to hover. To keep everything organized, we'll adjust the order. Put the hover state of the primary button right next to its default version and do the same for the secondary button. This way everything is clear. We can also store all these versions in a table in the design system so they are easy to organize at a glance. Now let's prototype these buttons. Select the primary default button, go to the prototype section, and connect it to the primary hover button. Here we have the trigger, which we'll set it to while hovering. Repeat the process for the secondary button as well. Okay, let's play the homepage and check it out. Now when I hover over either the primary or secondary button, I can see the hover effect. See how interactive it is. This is how you can make your buttons and UI elements interactive using the interactive component feature in Figma. It's a super powerful tool that lets you create some amazing things. Okay, let's say your design is ready and you are preparing to either collect the screens for your portfolio or hand off assets for development. Here is how you can export it. First, select what you want to export. This could be an individual element, a group of elements, or an entire frame. For example, let's say we are exporting this homepage frame. Select it and go to the Properties panel and scroll down. At the very bottom, you'll see the Export section. By default, it will show 1x, which means it will export your design at its original size. Here you can also choose the file formats PNG, JPEG, SVG, or PDF, depending on what the developer or client needs. Now let's talk about the 1x, 2x, or 3x options. These numbers determine the resolution or size of the exported file. If you export at 1x, the file will have the exact same dimensions as your design in Figma. If you export at 2x, both the width and height will double. For example, if your frame is 1440 pixel wide, the exported file will be 2880 pixel wide. The same applies to 3x, where the dimensions are tripled. Why does this matter? It's because of high-resolution displays like Retina screens. These screens have a higher pixel density. So, to ensure your designs appear sharp and crisp, developers often ask for assets at 2x or even 3x. If you only export at 1x, the visuals may look blurry on these devices. Once you've set your export settings, like the format and resolution, just click Export, and the file will download immediately. And that's it! By using the right export settings, you can provide developers with assets that look professional and polished on any device. Keep in mind the project requirement and ask your developer if you are unsure about what resolution to use. If you remember, we defined this practice file within a team project at the beginning. So, what should we do if we want to add other designers to work on it together? Or sometimes you might just want to share the project with a client or developer for preview purposes, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a team project. In that case, you can head over to the blue Share button at the top. When you click on it, a window will pop up. From here, you can copy the link and share it with others. Once you copy the link, you can send it to someone and they don't need an invitation. They can simply paste the link into their browser to access your project. You can also enter an email address to either give them view-only access or allow them to edit, depending on whether they are your team members or not. Once you enter the email and click Send Invite, an invitation link will be sent to them, and they can accept it. From here, you can choose who has access, only invited user, or anyone in the team project. You can copy the link to access the dev mode or prototype view specifically. Additionally, you can publish your project to the Figma community and get an embed code for easy sharing. Let's say you are working on a large-scale project with a design team, and you need feedback from other designers, team members, or stakeholders. In that case, they can easily add comments directly on the design. For example, if someone wants you to change the font size of a heading, they can create a comment here saying, "Hey Masa, could you please change this header font size to 120? Once they send it, you can open the comment and reply. Let's say you make a change and update the font size to 120. You can then reply with "done" and send it. Once you address the feedback, you can close the comment by clicking on the Resolve button. This feature is incredibly helpful when collaborating with others and seeking feedback on your design. UI kits are a collection of libraries curated by Figma and its partners. They are available from the Assets tab in Figma design files. UI kits include high-quality components, style variables, and example screens to kickstart your designs. Even if you don't have a design system of your own, they work just like any other library in Figma, allowing you to pull assets directly onto your canvas from the Assets tab. Figma currently offers 3 main UI kits: iOS and iPadOS 18 by Apple, Material Tree Design Kit by Google, and Simple Design System by Figma. Once you have accessed a UI kit, you can use it like any other Figma library. You can insert components directly onto your canvas, swap instances to update designs seamlessly, or customize component variants before inserting them into your project. Here are the key benefits of using UI kits. You can skip building basic components from scratch and focus on customizing designs. UI kits follow established design standards, ensuring your work looks polished and professional. And when your team uses the same kits, everyone works with unified styles and components. Let's talk about Dev Mode in Figma, a feature designed to streamline the handoff between designers and developers. It's available only on Figma's paid plans, like Professional or Organization. So, if you are on the free version, you won't have access. So, what is Dev Mode? It's a specialized workspace for developers to inspect and extract design details, like measurements, colors, typography, and downloadable assets. It reduces back-and-forth questions and ensures your designs are implemented accurately. As a designer, you might not need to use Dev Mode daily, but it's a great tool for previewing how your design will be interpreted by developers. You can double-check spacing, asset setups, and even generate a Dev Mode link to share directly with the team. If you are in a smaller team or freelancing, Dev Mode can make hands-off smoother and save time. While it's not essential for every designer, understanding how it works can elevate your workflow and communication with developers. Now let me show you Figma AI. Currently, Figma AI is in its beta phase and is being gradually rolled out to users. Some users already have access, while others may need to wait. If you are using Figma as part of a company account, access might also depend on your workspace setting. While the features are free during the beta period, Figma has mentioned that limitations or additional pricing could be introduced in the future. If you don't have access to Figma AI yet, here is what you can do. Update Figma. Make sure you are using the latest version of the app. Join the beta. Head to Figma's AI beta page. I've included the link in the description. And sign up if it's available. Check admin settings. If you are part of a workspace, ask your admin to enable AI features. And stay updated. Keep an eye on Figma's announcements and newsletter for rollout updates in your region. So, what does Figma AI do? It helps you get started faster, find what you need, and stay in the flow of your work. You can access Figma AI tools through the Actions menu in the Figma Design toolbar. Some of the available tools include Make a prototype, rename layers, first draft, replace content, rewrite or shorten text, translate text, generate an image, and remove background. Let me show you a few examples of how these tools work. First, let's try the Make an Image tool. I'll write a prompt describing the image I want. For example, an image of a girl reading a book while wearing a hat. Figma generates 4 different images for us to choose from. I'll pick this one. Next, let's test the Remove Background tool. I'll select an image, go to the Actions menu, and choose Remove Background. And just like that, the background is gone. It's clean, quick, and perfect for using in our designs. Let's add it to our membership page. Now, let's try the First Draft tool. This feature helps you create a screen design with just a simple prompt. I'll type an Our Story page for a website about human stories and ideas. And here we go, Figma generates a complete design for the page. You can use this as inspiration or starting point if you are short on time. Plus, it's fully editable, and Figma suggests alternative colors and font options. And that's Figma AI. It's a powerful tool that makes designing faster, easier, and more efficient. And that's a wrap for today's dive into Figma. I hope you find this tutorial helpful and feel more confident using Figma in your designs. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more tutorials and tips. Drop a comment below to share your favorite Figma features or suggest a topic for my next video. Thanks so much for watching and happy designing!